Kelda Yoon, a pro-Palestinian encampment at the University of Toronto has ended. After 2 months of protests, students packed up their tents shortly before the court-ordered deadline of 6 p.m. today. But they say their fight is not over yet, and they are still determined to get the school to heed their demands. Tyler Cheese joins us from U of T tonight. And Tyler, how did this all come to a close?
Yeah, Kelda, it's been a pretty intense day. I was out here 24 hours ago, just after that court order came down, and we really had no idea what was going to happen today. However, in the end, the students did leave peacefully, but not without having their voices heard first.
Let us be clear. The University of Toronto will disclose its investments, divest from companies profiting from Palestinian suffering. They will divest from companies profiting from the Palestinian suffering and deaths, and cut ties with academic institutions tied to the Israeli war machine. The question is not if, but when.
At its height, the encampment at U of T was home to around 200 tents. Now it's basically back to the same plain stretch of grass with light patches showing where those tents once stood. And after 63 days, emotions are high.
I am feeling overwhelmed and appalled to be a newly alumni of the new university that continues to invest in weapons and bombs and the destruction of Palestinians' lives and their futures.
The university refutes the protesters' claims and in June sought an injunction to have them removed. It was granted that injunction Tuesday, which gave students till 6 p.m. Wednesday to leave. Some were expecting a clash with police, but instead the protesters packed up early.
We have decided today to end our encampment and not give police the show that U of T has wanted from the very beginning.
In a statement, U of T President Merrick Gertler says, "I am pleased that protesters have ended the encampment peacefully so that front campus can be restored and returned to the entire community. Members of our community continue to be free to exercise their right to free speech and lawful protest at the University of Toronto." And that's just what they did. After packing up, hundreds of protesters and their supporters took to the streets throughout campus to let it be known they will find other ways to continue their fight. Meanwhile, some Jewish students and faculty came together at the now empty site of the encampment.
It's nice to be Jewish again on campus because I know that me and other peers, other Jewish students here at U of T, they have been scared to be openly Jewish. They have been scared to wear the Magen David, the David Star. They have been scared to wear the kippah.
Shortly after the protesting students left, police were on scene to patrol, and crews had already begun taking down the remaining fences. Now, the overall message we've received from students is that they do plan to return to protest, and that's allowed under the injunction just as long as they do it within daytime hours and don't set up camp again. But Kelda, for right now, it's pretty quiet around here.
Yeah, thanks so much for this, Tyler. Our Tyler Cheese live for us at U of T tonight. And as mentioned, the encampment at U of T was first erected 2 months ago, and a lot has happened there along the way, from clashes to convocation. Our Shannon Martin takes us through 60 days of student protests and looks at where we go from here.
For more than 60 days, dozens of tents have filled King's College Circle here at the University of Toronto. But now that a judge has ruled students can protest but not camp out on school property, what does that mean for the future of student demonstrations?
As the judge outlined very clearly, this encampment is not hateful. Protesting for Palestine is not hateful. It is not anti-Semitic. It is none of those things.
Student protesters say their encampment is only one tactic and their community is strong.
We should not be surprised by the outcome.
The student's lawyer says the judge's decision is based on a single legal principle: who owns private property.
This is repeatedly what is done in injunction cases when people stand up collectively and when they try to challenge the status quo.
In a statement, the University of Toronto said the decision affirms people's rights to assemble and protest, but added the court order returns front campus to the entire university community and prevents any one group from asserting control of a shared space at the university in order to promote a particular view and deprive others of the freedom to express opposing viewpoints. To understand how we got here, we need to go back more than 8 weeks. It was about 4 a.m. on a Thursday morning when pro-Palestinian demonstrators crossed through fencing put up by the university and started setting up their encampment. At first, it was some 55 tents. Then, as the days stretched into weeks, that ballooned. From the very beginning, students have said they are in it for the long haul. Calling on U of T to divest from companies profiting from Israel's offensive in Gaza and end partnerships with Israeli academic institutions they say are complicit in the war. The school has said it holds no, quote, direct investments in any companies and will not boycott partnerships with other universities.
We're not looking for any empty words from the administration. We're not looking for any meetings that doesn't really get us anywhere, where no promises are made. We're really hoping for President Gertler and his administration to meet our exact demands to the word, and we're not leaving until we get that.
The university has said repeatedly that it respects students' rights to lawful protest.
Our approach is in keeping with the university's fundamental commitments to free expression, peaceful protest, and the diversity of opinions that exist in our community.
But said school property is private property. And a few weeks into the encampment, it issued a trespass notice after what it called a full and fair offer to the encampment participants was rejected. A deadline for demonstrators to clear out came and went. And that's when the university decided to take the case to court. The school was hoping the encampment would be gone before some 34 convocation ceremonies took place in June, but those went ahead as scheduled with some stepped-up security. Outside the ceremonies, a Jewish organization held a press conference talking about the ongoing harms facing Jewish students, some too scared to go to their own graduation.
We continue to call on the U of T administration to show leadership and send a clear message that a hateful, anti-Jewish occupation of the campus will not be tolerated.
Half a dozen Jewish organizations who gave submissions at the hearing say they are relieved the encampment will be coming down. This U of T professor is a member of the Jewish Faculty Network. He also supports the encampment. He said protesting is one thing, but getting the university administration's attention was another.
This was the only way the students who've been trying since December to get the university administration across all three campuses get their attention. This was the only time that the university administration actually took them seriously. That it was only through the encampment, the People's Circle for Palestine, that the students could get the university administration's attention to the point where they started to negotiate. That negotiation should have gone faster, and there were certain guarantees that the students were looking for that the administration would simply not give.
News now, a man is dead after he was struck by a streetcar downtown. It happened at around 3:45 this afternoon on Queen Street near Sororan Avenue. Paramedics performed CPR on the victim, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. Queen Street was shut down for several hours. The TTC says it is deeply saddened by the accident and will be assisting police with the investigation. York police are asking for witnesses following a series of shootings at a cinema in Richmond Hill, the latest incident happening this past weekend.
This is actually the fourth time that this same location has been targeted. The first was May 17th, May 19th, May 24th, and then this past Saturday.
Police releasing this footage of the latest shooting in the area of Highway 7 and East Beaver Creek Road. During two of the incidents, police say the cinema was open, but in all four, no one was injured. York police are treating the incidents as part of one investigation. There's been a step forward in two class action lawsuits against the province. The lawsuits take aim at the use of lockdowns in Ontario jails as a way to deal with staffing shortages. New expert reports served by the plaintiffs take a look at the impacts on inmates and staff. Sarah McMillan reports.
It's been more than a decade since Ali, an asylum seeker at the time, was locked up at the Maplehurst Correctional Complex in Milton as an immigration detainee. Ali is not his real name, and this is not his real voice.
It's been 10 years, but it's still like it happened yesterday. It leaves a scar in your mental health.
CBC has agreed not to reveal his identity as he worries it could affect his employment. He's now a permanent resident. During his 7-week detainment, Ali says he experienced numerous lockdowns where he was stuck in a shared cell for hours on end, with no privacy for using the toilet and unable to shower, call a lawyer, or get fresh air.
As a human, you want to look at the sky. That's your nature as a human being.
Lawyers behind 2 class action lawsuits argue experiences like Ali's are all too common and allege negligence on the part of the province and the federal government. The lawsuits cover the period from 2009 to 2017. One is for inmates during that time, the other immigration detainees like Ali, who were held in provincial jails on behalf of the Canada Border Services Agency. The lawsuits allege that lockdowns as a way to deal with staffing shortages became chronic.
The easiest, cheapest, and cruelest way to deal with a staffing problem is to do a lockdown. And every time the opportunity presented itself, that's what Ontario chose.
Lawyer Scott Hutchison says there are more than 100,000 potential claimants between the 2 lawsuits. Combined, they're seeking $1.5 billion in damages.
The reports served by the plaintiffs come from experts with backgrounds in corrections, psychiatry, and international human rights law. According to the reports, the use of lockdowns as a way to deal with staffing shortages is not common practice elsewhere in the country. One expert who teaches in the Department of Criminal Justice at the University of Winnipeg even said he was puzzled when first approached to write a report because he hadn't encountered staffing-related lockdowns as a regular practice elsewhere. He called the practice callous.
Experts also wrote about the long-term mental health consequences of frequent lockdowns, comparing it to solitary confinement, a comparison the province rejects. Howard Sapers is the former correctional investigator of Canada and former independent advisor on corrections for Ontario. He's not involved in these lawsuits, but shares concerns about the use of lockdowns.
Well, even if you were mentally well at the beginning of that process, spending a couple of weeks in isolation can change that quickly.
Sapers notes issues around staffing-related lockdowns in Ontario have been well documented, including in a 2008 Auditor General's report.
And really, there's no good excuse why it hasn't been dealt with.
Information obtained by CBC through a Freedom of Information request shows the practice hasn't gone away. In 2021, there were nearly 800 full lockdowns at jails across the province. That's up from the peak of 636 during the class action period.
The province and the federal government have both denied negligence in their statements of defense, with the province saying lockdowns were only used when necessary to ensure the safety of inmates and staff. Sarah McMillan, CBC News.
Welcome back. A major daycare operator in the city says it has no choice but to cut employee wages due to a lack in funding. The Learning and Richmond Foundation has 25 locations in the GTA and serves nearly 2,000 children. Lane Harrison has this story.
About 200 daycare workers across 25 locations are facing a wage cut this fall, and the Learning and Richmond Foundation's director, Peter Frampton, says the blame lies with a long-time federal promise. The child care program meant to cut daycare fees to $10 a day by 2026.
We have been waiting over 2 years for a modernized funding formula that went beyond just reductions in fees for parents, which is incredibly important, that level of access, but also spoke to quality, which means consistent staff, and really enabling staff to have a living wage within the City of Toronto.
While the program is a signature of the federal Liberals, it's up to the province to determine the funding model. Frampton says that model is stuck in the past and hasn't kept up with inflation and the rising cost of living. That's causing the foundation to roll back wages by about $2.30 an hour, part of wage increases put in place over a year ago to retain staff.
Obviously, people aren't happy. The pressure on frontline workers is unconscionable, and there has to be some changes. People need to be able to have confidence that they can feed their own family as they're caring for others.
Under the national program, daycares had to cut their fees in half, with the province committing to replace that lost revenue. But advocates say that's being done with outdated costs and is putting the industry in jeopardy. The province is planning to implement a new model in 2025, but details are scant. Alicia Lamb's 3-year-old son is at one of the foundation's daycares, where staff have literally saved his life during medical emergencies. She was devastated to hear their wages are going down.
They have a right to live in a dignified, financially comfortable way. The job itself is demanding physically, emotionally. I love being a mom, but I could not do it. I am afraid that it'll impact not the quality of care that they want to provide, but maybe the people that can be retained, the training that they're able to provide, the resources that are available to them as employees.
The foundation is hopeful that the wage reduction will be temporary. The federal government says it's on the province to fix the situation, while the province says Ottawa needs to step up funding if it wants the program to succeed. Lane Harrison, CBC News, Toronto.
Hurricane Beryl is bearing down Jamaica as it continues its charge across the Caribbean. The Category 4 storm has sustained winds topping 200 kilometers an hour. The storm is now lashing the south shore of the island and buffeting the capital. Government officials are warning that the worst is yet to come. Jamaica has closed all 3 of its international airports and imposed a curfew. Hundreds of people have been placed in shelters. The storm is being blamed for at least 9 deaths and extensive damage in the southeastern Caribbean. Beryl is headed to the Cayman Islands next. As Hurricane Beryl makes landfall in Jamaica, those in Toronto's Jamaican community, many with family there, are anxiously watching. Chris Glover spoke to some of them today.
At this barber shop in Toronto's Little Jamaica, the TV is locked on a silent live feed of the streets and rivers of Jamaica.
Well, if you look at that image right now, that one is kind of scary. This is my wife.
Shavado Roden is in Toronto studying, while back home in Jamaica, his 9-year-old son, 4-year-old daughter, and his wife are in the path of Hurricane Beryl.
She's taking it okay. Of course, I'm not there, so, she does have a little, nervousness towards it. But things are looking not so good, but we're just hoping for the best.
He knows Beryl is the earliest Category 5 hurricane on record, and while the storm's been downgraded to a Category 4, it's still expected to impact Jamaica with wind speeds over 200 kilometers an hour.
It is a real concern for me, knowing that my wife and kids is back home. Also, I have other family members, my sister and, my nephew and niece and so on. So it is a real concern. However, they already make preparations, so.
According to Global Affairs Canada, there are more than 1,600 Canadians registered in Jamaica. As storm preparations are underway, the country is now under a curfew and its international airports are closed.
Yeah, so again, still not getting through.
Leaving Torontonians like Cheryl Woolnough, who lived in Jamaica for 5 years, on edge.
It's very concerning. Not hearing from family or friends, not knowing if they're okay, if their living situation is safe and stable. I've actually experienced some of it myself. It's quite frightening at times because, again, the infrastructure as well, depending on where one is, can be quite unstable.
Hi, how are you? As long as connectivity holds up, Sharon Walker is determined to check in on loved ones. What's the kind of atmosphere like among the people there?
Well, we're battened down, and the Prime Minister has put on curfew and says, everybody should head for home. So we are actually on shutdown mode, waiting to see if the storm comes our way. We're not seeing anything, but that doesn't say we're not going to get anything later on because we're at the other end of the island.
Sharon, how does it feel hearing everything that you just heard?
I'm glad she's okay. I'm glad everything is not too bad.
I have some pictures on my phone you might be able to.
Unfortunately, not the same immediate relief at a nearby barber shop.
First gust of wind and my plum tree gone. That means like the wind is over there. It's strong, right? It's a current experience.
Jody Vassell has seen some initial impact on friends' social media, but he's seen countless powerful storms forecasted to cause destruction on Jamaica skip it entirely. Still, in the back of his mind, when the phone doesn't connect, he worries.
Thinking of how heavy the rain can be could be a little bit difficult just thinking about it a little bit now that I'm thinking about it.
Back with Rhoda, he too is praying Beryl isn't as bad as feared.
I guess praying is the only option right now that I can do right now. You know, praying for the best.
And he'll continue to pray for his wife and kids in the danger zone, some 3,000 kilometers away. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's go to Victa Palo now with more on our forecast. And Victa, it's important to remember to take care in these hot and humid temperatures, which are sticking around for the rest of the week.
Now, when it comes to all of these warmer overnight temperatures, one thing you have to look for are symptoms of heat exhaustion. If you experience any dizziness, rapid heartbeat, headache, or you're feeling a bit faint, you definitely want to make sure you're aware of these signs and you want to grab a seat and grab yourself a cold glass of water if you can. Now, with the overnight lows not getting much lower than around 20 to 19 degrees and daytime highs being around 37 degrees, there's not a lot of turnaround for temperatures to drop down for people's temperatures to cool. As you do see, we had daytime highs early around 37, and these are going to continue all the way through into your Thursday and your Friday. Now, the mornings are not going to give much relief either. It's going to be around 19 degrees when we start our day. By the time we get into the rest of the day tomorrow, it's going to still be warm. Now, we talk about the rain that's going to be passing by. It's going to be not that big. It's going to be more of the scattered shower variety. If you take a look here, by the time we do start our morning, it's going to be a little bit cloudy, but the cloud cover is going to be all said and gone by the time it's noon. Noon is going to be around a time where it's going to be closer to feeling around 30, if not 35 degrees with the humidity. Now, also the UV index is going to be around 9 tomorrow. So you want to make sure if you have any older people who you have to care for, or any young people might not have any air conditioning, you want to check in on your loved ones, because when the temperatures are this hot and there's not that much cloud cover for relief, you always want to make sure that those people are taken care of, as well as making sure you're also taking care of for yourself. And make sure you don't leave any pets or any animals locked inside any vehicles while the temperatures are this warm as well. Now, we're talking about rainfall accumulation, and we're not going to be receiving that much. Nowhere near 20, nowhere near 25 millimeters of rain at all. Not that much rain even to bring us any kind of relief, because if you do look at our 3 and 5 day forecast, you can see the temperatures don't really drop after the rainfall at all. After Thursday's rain, it's still going to remain consistently around 30 degrees, and after Saturday's rain, it's still around 30 degrees for your weekend. So if you're trying to make any plans to go outdoors or do anything over the next couple of days, I'd probably suggest around Thursday afternoon, because it's going to be quite clear. But then once you get closer to Friday, we're expecting a bigger system of rain to pass by, as well as for your Saturday morning. Make sure you stay dry, Toronto. Make sure you stay cool. And over to you.
Thanks so much, Victa. And that is our show for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you back here tomorrow at 6. Have a great night, everyone.